was amazing. So maybe it's because I have a background in theater, but I've always been fond of icebreakers. Whenever I do them, I learn something new about people. Did anyone here learn anything about one of your friends that you hadn't already known? Yeah? They're fun activities. And yet they're called icebreakers for a reason. They're just a beginning. In many ways, this first month together in our ministries is like an icebreaker. We're just starting what I believe will be a profound and transformative ministry together. But the beginning is all about getting to know each other, building up our relationship so that I can truly serve our community. But no amount of games will really give me that information. Because it takes so much more to build a strong relationship. It takes stories, the little vignettes, and the life-changing moments. It takes curiosity about who UUCiL is and was. It takes commitment and trust on both sides. But more than anything, it takes time. And unfortunately, there is no substitute. And it can be infuriating sometimes because we often want to skip to the end, where we have the answers, we've built the trust, and we can just do the work of ministry. But ask any scientist in this room, and I think there are a number of them. They'll tell you that the pursuit of knowledge is never complete. And there is no substitute for the time to observe, look for a pattern, research that pattern, come to a hypothesis, and experiment. And experiment. And experiment. Ad infinitum. But even when an experiment does finally answer a question, very often another one arises. And the wonderful thing about science is that it's exciting when that happens, because we get the opportunity to keep making discoveries, to keep innovating. That's what helps us to stay curious and creative. Because what's sacred in science isn't necessarily the answers or even the questions, because both of those can change based upon newer information. What's really sacred is the process. Humility mixed with curiosity and good old-fashioned commitment to keep on seeking. And that feels pretty relevant right now, because building relationships goes through the same process. We're just a little bit less intentional about it. When it comes to people, our curiosity can sometimes be harder to find, including for the people that we love. And even though I am generally the prominent variable right now, this applies to your relationships with each other too. The other day, I was talking to my dad on the phone, and we had been discussing a church email that he got, which referenced Martin Luther King Sr., MLK Jr.'s father, who was also a famous minister. And he offhandedly remarked about how MLK Sr. was this larger-than-life person, much like his son. And I asked, "You mean in the stories you've heard about him?" And he said, "Oh no, when I met him. He came to my church and worked with my youth group and got us involved in the civil rights movement after his son was killed." I was stunned. I said, "Dad, you didn't think to tell your minister daughter that you knew MLK Sr. and was involved in the civil rights movement? How is this just coming up now?" Well, I had never asked him about his youth group, and he's not the kind of person to brag. In fact, despite knowing that faith is incredibly important to my dad, who's been a practicing liberal Christian for his entire life, I knew very little about his church activities when he was growing up. Since I have a strong relationship with my family, since I know so much about them, I never thought to be a little more curious about the specifics. And the specifics are everything. They tell the story of what's important to us and why, and how we can build relationships around those values rather than around, for instance, our favorite dessert. Because as we've seen, humans have a strong inclination to form groups around affinities and similarities. Sometimes they're horrible, like white supremacy groups. Sometimes they're just trivial, like exercise classes. Not that exercise classes aren't great. So, who are we? Do we bond around our similarities, shared activities, shared affinities? Or is our bond something deeper, something curious, something that rejoices in our diversity? I happen to think it's the latter, but it does call for intentional work from all of us. Because curiosity is a lot harder than it looks. And the reason why is because we have an emotional stake in these relationships. And so often, when we have an interaction that rubs us the wrong way, our first instinct is to retreat. 4 years ago, when I was a chaplain resident, I had a conversation with a woman whose husband was in the ICU. I probably spent 2 hours with her. And the entire time, she kept talking about how working mothers were going to hell. Now, I wasn't a mother yet, but I had every intention of one day becoming a working mother. So you can imagine this didn't sit well with me. And I obviously had enough common sense about my job not to yell at her or tell her she was wrong. She was sitting next to her husband in critical condition. What I neglected to do, however, because of my own anger and inability to name it, was to wonder with her why this was coming up now, or how she was integrating her church's teachings on mercy into her life. Because chances are, I missed ministering to a major wound. And her regrets went unnamed. And that breaks my heart. When I realized during my chaplaincy program was that at the heart of ministry is the need to know myself. That's ultimately the key to curiosity, the key to relationship building, to ministry building. In order to really know each other, we have to simultaneously get to know ourselves. Observe our emotional responses. Notice the patterns. Mark them down. And creatively address them in a way that works for us. That will look different for each of us. It will take experimenting with your emotions a little bit. And just like in science, the humility to get it wrong sometimes, with the understanding that each mistake teaches us something about ourselves. 4 months after I talked to that woman in the ICU, I met with another woman in her 50s. She had end-stage cancer, and she was a Jehovah's Witness. And as soon as she mentioned her faith, she brought up those words that trigger every painful alarm bell in me. Hellfire and Judgment Day. God help me, I wanted to leave. And I could feel the anxiety and discomfort swelling. She appeared to be at death's door, absolutely no energy, falling asleep mid-sentence. She deserved my compassion and care. So as I listened to her, I remembered my previous experience in which I had missed an opportunity. So I took a breath. I acknowledged my discomfort internally, didn't shame myself, but named it, and then thought, how can I love this woman better? As she talks about Judgment Day, what might actually be underneath? So I asked her about her faith, how it was affecting the way she viewed her illness. And we ended up having the most beautiful conversation. She told me all about her family, how much love and support they'd given her, how to her the most important elements of her faith were agency and love. By the time we ended our conversation, she was energized. She was alive. Her faith was actually giving her life. And she asked me, a UU who couldn't have had more different theological beliefs, to come back and visit with her again, which I did several times. But if I hadn't sought to know myself better in that moment, I wouldn't have been able to seek her. And this is my hope for all of us, that we continue to get to know each other and relish the differences between us. It is precisely because we are different, because we are diverse, that we can be stronger in our bond, more spiritual in our relationship, more thoughtful in coming to determine exactly who we are. Because getting to know each other is actually a spiritual and theological pursuit. It is the intersection of Unitarian and Universalist heritage. It integrates our intellect and thirst for knowledge with our empathetic heart that hopes to seek our own and each other's worth and dignity. This is embodying Unitarianism and Universalism. To see each other as a source of revelation for creating this wondrous thing that we call beloved community. For UUs, revelation, like scientific inquiry, is ongoing. And the unity of our differences will make us a stronger force of love through our curiosity. We are in a blessed dance with knowledge, empathy, and curiosity. And despite our many differences, that dance is already vibrant within you. So, beloved members and friends, let us continue to seek ourselves, to seek each other, and to seek unity in our diversity. For we are living, breathing sources of revelation. Here's to our many future discoveries. Blessed be, and amen.